The next exercise is exercise 3-43-5, the indexing base. And here's what it's going to look like at the end of the day. I'm going to go ahead and move this off. This is some scratch work that I was doing. So what I'll do is, as I do this, let me get it way off. I'll keep this off to the side to look at it, and we'll draw one over here just to the right of it, just so we can see what's happening here. And so as we look at this, it tells us some information. It gives us some circles, and we know what the radius or diameters are. And what I want to do is I want to first start with this little circle here, and it looks like the diameter is 1.5. And the way I know that is there's a little circle with a line through it. That means it's the diameter symbol. If there's an R in front of the dimension, it tells us that it's a radius. And when we draw our circle, we can either draw the circle center point radius or center point diameter. You just got to make sure you keep them straight. If you happen to make a mistake, you can always click on the circle in question. I don't know if they've talked about it yet in the chapter, but if you click on any object and do a right click and go to the properties, you can see the properties. At this time it's a circle up here, and if we look down far enough, it'll say diameter and radius, and we can change those items on the fly in case we make a mistake. So we don't really have to redraw everything if we mess up. So I'm going to pick circle, and actually I want to pick circle radius. And I'll do some math in my head. It's a diameter of 1.5, so half of that's 0.75, so I just got to make sure that when it prompts me for the radius, I type in 0.75. And in this example, I don't really care where we start. I'm just going to pick a random point. We don't really need any kind of an absolute coordinate to start with, so I'm just going to pick out here in space somewhere. When it's asking me for my radius, I'm going to type in 0.75. So there's my first circle. The next circle that I like to draw is this one here. And again, the way I draw this is it's one step at a time, and as you get more and more experience, you'll be able to come up with your own strategies how you want to do this. There are lots of ways to do this. I'm just doing it the way that kind of makes sense to me. And what I typically do on something like this is draw a bunch of the circles and the lines, the construction lines, then come back later and trim it out to flesh it out what the object should be. So I'm going to draw this circle next, and we know that it has a radius of 3. So I'll go to the circle command, and I'm going to use my center OSNAP. I've got my, if I do a shift right click and go to OSNAP settings, I happen to have the center OSNAP on, and it's called running mode, which means it's going to be on all the time unless I override it by selecting up here on the toolbar, or I can do a shift right click and select one of these OSNAPs, which would be an override, a temporary override, a one-time override, if you will. So I'm going to select that circle to get the center point, and I drag it out. I know my radius is 3. So I've got that. The next thing that I'd like to do is to go ahead and maybe try to find the center line, this arc. Our circles are going to fall along that center line someplace. And the radius is, if we look at it here, looks like it's a 4-inch radius. But the center is going to be the top of this circle right there, that's going to be the quadrant. So we've got a nice center point. We can OSNAP to that quadrant. So we go up to the circle command again, and by default it wants to go to the center. So if I do a shift right click, I can select quadrant. Now I've got my quadrant there. And my radius is going to be 4. So if I type in 4. So that little notch there, the center of that is going to follow along, that notch is going to follow the path of that radius. So what I'd like to do next maybe is to draw these 2 little circles here. The center is going to be someplace along this circle, we know. And I'm going to turn on my, let's see, what's my polar tracking say? My polar tracking is on increments of 30. So let's use the polar. Let's see if that works for us. What I want to do is I want to draw one construction line. It looks like it's 60 degrees off of vertical in a clockwise. And then the other line here, we're told that it's 30 degrees counterclockwise off of vertical. So let's go up to the line command, and I'm going to shift right click and go to my quadrant again to grab that circle. I could have used the center of that circle too. So here is the vertical, and what it's going to do with that polar tracking, if you notice, I've got it set so every 30 degrees it's going to snap, which is exactly what we want. So here it is, and as you move it around, it'll kind of have that little magnetic snap feel to it, and you'll get a green line. So there's 30, and if I go 30 more, it should snap about right. Actually, what was that? Let's see. So see, there's 30. Right there. So now this next one here, what I'm going to do is go back to the line command. Instead of using the polar tracking, I'll turn that off. I'll select the center of that circle, which is the quadrant of this other circle. And this time I want to go to, I'm going to use the polar command, so we can type in, at this point, do a shift, that 2, which is that @ symbol. And for a distance, I want to do something, just something way off. So I'm going to do 10, that should be enough. And then the minus sign, and then the angle is going to be, it tells us 30, and in AutoCAD by default, if you go counterclockwise, that's a positive angle. So I'll type in 30 here. And maybe my settings are off here a little bit. So let's undo that. I'm still in the line command, so let's do @10 minus 30. All right, I got a little ahead of myself there again. It tells us 30. This is, I could say I did that on purpose, but I actually forgot. What we've got here is if I do my ortho on, the 0 is going to be at 3 o'clock. So if I were to go up to 12 o'clock, that's 90. Another 30 over, that's 120. So third time will be the charm @10 minus sign, or excuse me, that's a less than sign, 120. There we go. So you might want to review chapter 1 or 2 where it talks about the polar. You've got that @ symbol. The format is the @ symbol, the distance, the less than sign, and the angle. So the mistake I made there was I was looking at the drawing and I saw 30, so I wanted to use that 30. And that got me into a little bit of trouble there. So 0 is actually again at 3 o'clock. So I had to go 120 to get that. So I think we're good now. So let's type in the circle. Let's draw those little circles. Let's go up to the circle command. We've got 2 good intersections there to start our circles. And that's going to be my first center point. And it tells us, it doesn't really tell us what the radius or diameter is, but it does give us a dimension of what the width of that notch, which will basically be the diameter of our circle, which is 1.5. So it's asking for a radius, so I'm going to do some math in my head. Half of 1.5 is 0.75, so I can type in 0.75. And I'll draw another circle there at 0.75. Let's see if I can make sure I got that intersection. 0.75. Okay. So let's go ahead and draw that notch. Let's get that notch drawn. And the way I'm going to attack that notch is, I know that the total width of that notch is 1.5. I've got a circle there that's at the center of it. So what I'm going to do is offset that circle 0.5 in each direction and then do some trimming. So we go up to our offset command and type in 0.75. And I'll click there, go out, and come out. So let's trim up that notch a little bit so we can kind of see what's going on. So we go to the trim command, and I want to select those 2 little circles first. Hit enter, and then let's get rid of some of these lines here. And we'll go ahead and get rid of that one too. So now we've got that the notch drawn for us, and we could go a little further there. We'll go back into the trim command and select these two lines. In the last video that we did, I mentioned that when I do the trim command, sometimes I'll just select everything and make everything into a cutting edge, and then just go in and pick out the pieces I want. Sometimes it's faster to do it that way. Sometimes it's not. So I'll go ahead and get rid of this piece. Now our notch is complete there. The next part of this, what I'd like to do is draw this circle here. And looking at the diagram, it says that it has a radius of 2, and the center of that is going to be the same as the center of this circle here. So back up in the circle command. I can use the OSNAP radius. And find the center of the circle, or pick that intersection. And for the radius, we want to do 2. So that one is now drawn. The next part is, let's get this circle here. And if you look at that, the radius is 6. And the center of that circle is going to be here. So if we remember, this circle here has a radius of 3. So it has a diameter of 6. So if I were to draw a circle and pick that as my center point and just pick that quadrant, I could have typed in a 6 also, and that probably would have been easy. I just knew that that diameter of the circle was 6, so it worked out nicely there for me. So let's go ahead and start trimming out some things here. In this case here, let's start by selecting these circles as my trimming edge, and let's see what we've got. If I get rid of this piece, okay, that's coming along nicely. We'll stop right there. The next part we want to do is to draw this little circle there. And if we look at that, it's going to have a radius of 1. And from last chapter, we know that we can do a tangent radius. This is a good candidate for that method. So if I go up to circle and hit the down button, I can see that there's a tangent radius method. You gotta be careful. Once you do that, it'll default to that in your ribbon. So the next time you go to draw a circle there, you'll have to switch method. So if I do a tangent here, and then my radius is 1. As I'm looking at that circle there, it kind of threw me for a second. You can see that that circle doesn't look like it's in the right place. And one thing you got to be careful on when you do the tangent radius command, you want to try to pick the tangents about where they should be. And when I picked that, I made a mistake of picking down here on the circles on the inside, which we really needed to pick on the outside. And I'm guessing some of you might make that same mistake, and I wish I could say I did that to show you, but I actually just got a little careless. So let's try one more time and see what happens. We'll leave that circle there. So I click on circle, and it's a tangent radius. This time for our tangent points, let's pick out here instead of inside. So the first one will be here, the second will be there, and then we type in a 1. That's a little bit better. That's what I was expecting. So let's go ahead, escape out of that command. Let's get rid of that. We'll erase that little circle there that we don't need. While we're here, let's erase this line and this line as well. And now let's go ahead and do some trimming again. I'm going to put a crossing window to turn that into a cutting edge, and this also, hit enter, and I want to get rid of that. I want to get rid of this and that. So as I'm looking at the diagram there, it looks like we got everything. Later on, we'll show you how to turn this line into a center line type. But for the time being, we can just leave that there. So in this example here, we drew some circles, a lot of circles. We used center O-snaps, some quadrant O-snaps. We did some centers with diameter, centers with radius. We did the offset command. We did trimming. We did some polar coordinates there. I showed you how to mess up there and forget where the origin of 0 was, which is at 3 o'clock. but we got out of that. We got that fixed. And then that last little circle there, I made the mistake of putting that little circle when you do tangent radius of picking the wrong location for the tangent. Again, you want to make sure that you try to get close to where the tangents really are, and that way it'll draw correctly. So anyway, that's examples from chapter 3 of 3-411, lines, squares, and squares pattern, and 3-4, 3-5, the indexing base. I hope this helped you.
She was so good, wasn't she, Dad?